The civil registry office smelled like floor wax and old paper. So-Yeon had been here once before, at 19, to file paperwork after her father's accident. She remembered the fluorescent lights, the way sound moved differently in rooms where people came to make things official. She was 31 now. She was here to get married. Her family filled the back row of chairs, all 8 of them. They had not been invited. She had not told anyone the time or the address. And yet, here they were, with the specific energy of people who had come to watch something fail. Her aunt, Hwang Bok-ja, had brought a camera. "For memories," she'd said, when So-Yeon turned to look at her. The camera was already raised. Her sister Han Soo-jin sat with her arms crossed, wearing a dress that cost more than So-Yeon's monthly salary, next to her fiancé, who had the practiced expression of a man watching something beneath him. They had driven 40 minutes for this. That said everything about why they were here. So-Yeon faced forward and waited. He was late, not by much. 4 minutes. But the family noticed, and the whispers started at 3. Then the door opened. Seo Min-Joon wore a gray shirt. Plain, no tie. The kind of clothes that said nothing, revealed nothing, asked for nothing. He was 34, tall, with the particular stillness of someone who had learned long ago that most situations did not require a reaction. He had taken the bus. Bok-ja's camera clicked. Soo-jin made a sound that was not quite a laugh, but lived in the same neighborhood. So-Yeon watched him walk toward her and tried to read something in his face. She found very little. Not coldness exactly. More like distance, the expression of someone observing a situation from slightly further away than everyone else in the room. He stopped beside her. He did not bring flowers. He did not bring anything. He looked at her. It lasted 3 seconds. In those 3 seconds, something passed across his face that she could not name. Not recognition exactly, but something adjacent to it. Something that suggested he was not seeing a stranger. Then it was gone. "Sorry," he said, quietly. To her, not to the room. Behind them, someone in the family laughed outright. A short, sharp sound. Soo-jin did not bother to cover it. So-Yeon did not turn around. The official began. Standard language, standard questions. The fluorescent lights hummed. Outside, Seoul moved through a Tuesday morning with complete indifference. When it was her turn, So-Yeon paused. 1 second, maybe 2. She had rehearsed this. She had told herself it was practical. A solution to a problem. Her family's debt, her mother's medical bills, an arrangement that had been explained to her in a lawyer's office 3 weeks ago with language so clean it had almost not seemed real. She had told herself she was doing what she always did. Handling things. Standing here, under the fluorescent lights, beside a man whose last name she now shared and whose first name she had known for 23 days, she felt the full weight of what handling things had always cost her. She said yes. Seo Min-Joon had not paused. He said yes the way people say things they have already decided, without hesitation, without performance, like it was the most natural word in the language. The official stamped the document. Bok-ja's camera clicked again. In the back row, the family exchanged glances, the kind that said, "She'll regret this," the kind that said, "At least it won't last." So-Yeon accepted her copy of the document. She did not look at the back row. She looked at her husband. He was already looking at her. The address he had given her was in Hanam-dong. So-Yeon knew Hanam-dong the way most people in Seoul knew it, from the outside. From the kind of articles that listed neighborhoods where people like her did not live. She had assumed there was a mistake. A building near Hanam-dong, maybe. Adjacent. There was no mistake. The elevator required a key card. The lobby had a person whose only job appeared to be standing near the entrance, looking composed. The building had a name engraved above the entrance in letters that were not trying to impress anyone, which was somehow more impressive than if they had been. So-Yeon stood in front of it with her one suitcase and rechecked the address on her phone. Same address. The composed man near the entrance had already opened the door. She went in. The elevator opened directly into the apartment. This was the first thing, not a hallway, not a landing, directly into a space that was larger than any place she had ever lived, filled with the particular quality of light that only exists in rooms with floor-to-ceiling windows and nothing to block the sky. Seo Tae-yang was standing near the kitchen counter. She recognized him from their one previous meeting. Min-Joon's assistant, present at the lawyer's office. The man who had handed her the documents to sign with the precise efficiency of someone who organized other people's lives for a living. He looked up when she stepped out of the elevator. He looked at her face. Something happened. Half a second, less maybe, where his expression did something unplanned. A flicker, recognition, or something close to it, moving across his features before he pulled it back behind professionalism. He recomposed so quickly, she almost doubted she'd seen it. "Mrs. Seo," he said. "Welcome. Mr. Seo will arrive within the hour. I can show you to your room." She followed him down a hallway that was longer than her previous apartment. The room was not what she had expected. She had expected the spare room of a man who lived alone. Functional, empty, the kind of space that said, "This is where a person who is not important stays." She had prepared herself for that. She had told herself it would be fine. This room had been thought about, not decorated in a way that announced itself, not flowers, not gestures. But the lamp on the bedside table was positioned for reading. The shelves were empty, but there were enough of them. The window faced east. On the desk, there was a power strip with enough outlets for more devices than she currently owned. And beside it, a small ceramic cup holding pens. Someone had considered what a person might need. She stood in the middle of the room for a moment. Then she opened the desk drawer to put her documents away. The drawer was not empty. A photograph. Small, slightly faded at the edges. Two people standing in front of a building she didn't recognize. Somewhere formal, institutional, the kind of building that housed important things. One of them was a woman she didn't know, young, smiling at something outside the frame. The other was a man she almost didn't recognize, younger, without the stillness, not quite assembled yet into the person she had stood beside this morning. But it was Min-Joon. She looked at the woman. She did not know her. She put the photograph back exactly as she had found it, closed the drawer, and sat on the edge of the bed. Outside the window, Seoul was doing what Seoul always did, continuing, indifferent, enormous. She heard the elevator arrive. She heard his footsteps in the hallway, unhurried even, the same cadence she had already memorized without meaning to. They stopped outside her door. A pause. He did not knock. He moved on. She sat with the photograph in her mind, and the question she had not yet found the shape to ask. They came on a Saturday. So-Yeon heard the intercom first, the lobby attendant's voice, careful and apologetic. "There are several people here claiming to be family, Mrs. Seo. Shall I send them up?" She looked across the living room. Min-Joon was at his desk by the window. He had been there since morning, reading or working. She still couldn't tell the difference, because he approached both with the same quality of attention, which was total and gave nothing away. He did not look up from the page. "Send them up," he said, as if he had been expecting this. Perhaps he had. The elevator opened, and the Han family arrived with the specific energy of people who believed they were performing a rescue. Her mother first, apologetic eyes, hands already reaching for So-Yeon's arm. Then two uncles who had the decency to look merely uncomfortable. Then her aunt Bokja, who had brought food in containers because she believed food made difficult conversations easier and was incorrect about this. And then Soo-Jin. Soo-Jin walked in last. She walked in last because she had paused at the threshold and taken in the apartment, the ceilings, the windows, the quality of the silence. With an expression that moved through several emotions quickly, none of which she intended to show, and all of which So-Yeon saw. "So-Yeon, Her mother held her hands. "We're worried. We just want to talk." "You could have called," So-Yeon said. "You haven't been answering." This was true. Min-Joon had not stood, had not moved from his desk. 8 people had entered his home, and he had turned one page. Soo-Jin crossed the room toward him. She did this with the particular confidence of a woman who had been beautiful her whole life, and had learned to use a room like a current to carry her where she wanted to go. She stopped near his desk. She smiled the smile that had worked on every person she had ever directed it at. "You must be Min-Joon Si," she said. Warm. Practiced. "I'm So-Yeon's sister. I've been so looking forward to meeting you properly. I feel terrible that we didn't have a real celebration. If I'd known sooner, I would have insisted on something more." Min-Joon turned a page. He did not look up. Soo-Jin's smile held for 2 seconds past where it should have naturally ended. The uncles exchanged a glance. Bok-ja set her containers down on the kitchen counter and busied herself with opening them. So-Yeon's mother tried again. "We only came because we're concerned. This happened so quickly. We don't know anything about So-Yeon ah." Soo-Jin abandoned Min-Joon's desk and turned back to her sister with a new approach. Softer, the voice she used when she wanted to appear to be the reasonable one. "Uni, you don't have to do this. Whatever situation you were trying to solve, we can find another way. You don't have to stay in a marriage that what?" So-Yeon said. Soo-Jin stopped. "That what, Soo-Jin ah?" So-Yeon's voice was even. She had learned even a long time ago. "Finish this sentence." The room was quiet. Min-Joon spoke. He did not raise his voice. He did not stand. He set down the page he was reading and looked at the room, not at any one person, but at the room, and said 7 words. So-Yeon would remember the words for years. Not because they were dramatic, because they were the exact right words in the exact right order, delivered without heat, which made them more final than any argument. The Han family left. It took less than 2 minutes. Bok-ja took her containers. The elevator closed. The apartment returned to its previous quality of silence. So-Yeon stood in the center of the living room and turned to look at Min-Joon. He had picked the page back up. She stood there for a moment. Something was shifting in her. Slowly, without announcement. The way seasons change, not in a single day, not in a single event, but in an accumulation of small things that one morning add up to something new. She went to make tea. She made 2 cups without deciding to. She left one on the corner of his desk. He didn't acknowledge it. She sat on the other side of the room and drank hers. 20 minutes later, his cup was empty. She started with what was available. The apartment had a library, not a shelf, a room, and Min-Joon had not said she couldn't use it. She started there. She read the spines, cross-referenced what she found with what she knew about him, which was almost nothing, which meant every book was information, history, economics, one shelf of architecture, one shelf that seemed to be in a different organizational system from the rest. Older books, worn, the kind that get reread. She photographed the titles on her phone. She searched them. She searched him. Seo Min-Joon returned nothing useful. No social media, no articles, no photographs beyond a single low-resolution image from a university alumni page. 8 years old. Group photo back row, partially obscured. She tried the company name from the lawyer's documents. It was a holding company registered to another holding company. She traced it 2 levels and found a wall. She tried Taeyang's name, found a LinkedIn profile so sparse it seemed deliberately maintained at the minimum required to exist. At 1:47 a.m., she was at the kitchen table with her laptop and 3 browser tabs that had taken her nowhere new. She did not hear him until he was already there. Min-Joon stood at the edge of the kitchen. He was in a dark shirt, no jacket. The first time she had seen him without one. He looked at her laptop, looked at her, looked at the 3 tabs she had not closed fast enough. She did not apologize. He crossed the kitchen, sat down across from her at the table. He looked at the screen for a moment, just the current tab, the holding company registration page. And then he reached across and turned the laptop gently to face away from him, back toward her. "Waste of time," he said. She looked at him. "Why?" He said nothing. "If it's a waste of time," she said, "it means there's a faster way." "What's the faster way?" He looked at her for a moment. Something moved at the edge of his expression. Not quite amusement, but in that direction. "Ask me," he said. "I'm asking. Ask a specific question." She thought, "Why did you agree to this marriage?" The almost amusement settled back into stillness. "That's not specific," he said. It's extremely specific. It has too many possible answers. She waited. He did not continue. She had been learning his silences. There were at least 3 kinds. The silence that meant he was done. The silence that meant he was thinking. And a third kind she hadn't fully mapped yet, that felt different from both. This was the third kind. "Are you going to answer?" she said. "Not tonight." She should have pushed. She had always been the type to push, quietly, persistently, the way water finds the lowest point. But something in the way he said "not tonight" made it sound less like refusal and more like the specific kind of patience that implies a later. She closed the laptop. He didn't leave. He stood, moved to the counter, filled the kettle without asking what she wanted or whether she wanted anything. He took a specific canister from the back of the shelf, not the first one, not the obvious one, and made tea with the efficiency of someone who had made this particular tea before. He set the cup in front of her. She looked at it. Barley tea. Her mother used to make it. She had not had it in years. She had not mentioned it to anyone in this apartment, had not bought it, had not looked for it. She looked at him. He had already moved back to his side of the kitchen. She said nothing. He said nothing. She drank the tea. At 2:40 a.m., she went to bed. He was still at the table when she left, not doing anything she could identify, just sitting in the dark of the kitchen with the kind of stillness that takes a long time to learn. She was almost at her room when his phone rang. She heard his voice, low, from the kitchen. She can't know yet. A pause. Because it's not time. She stood in the hallway for 3 seconds. Then she went to bed and lay awake for a long time, watching the east-facing window wait for morning. So-Yeon found out on a Wednesday. She had been looking since the Saturday visit, since the moment she had stood in that apartment and understood, with the specific clarity of someone who had always been able to identify value, that she had made a catastrophic miscalculation. It took her 11 days. The holding company structure was meant to be untraceable. For most people, it was. So-Yeon hired someone who was not most people. A man who found things, who charged accordingly, who delivered a folder on a Wednesday afternoon that So-Yeon read twice in her car before she could trust her own hands to be steady. Seo Group, 3rd largest conglomerate in Korea. Logistics, real estate, 3 subsidiary technology companies. Annual revenue in numbers that So-Yeon had to read a second time because the first time her brain refused to process them as real. And Seo Min-Joon, quiet, gray-shirted, bus-riding Seo Min-Joon, was the sole heir. Reclusive by design, invisible by strategy. A man who had spent years making himself impossible to find in public records because visibility, for people at a certain level, was not an asset but a liability. She sat in her car for a long time. She had let her sister have him. She had laughed. What followed was not grief, not regret. So-Yeon did not process things through those channels. What followed was calculation. Fast, precise, unsentimental. She had always been good at this. She had spent her life being good at this. The laugh could be reframed. She had been surprised, that was all. She had not known. Nobody had known. And Min-Joon, by all evidence, had not corrected anyone's assumptions. Which meant he had reasons for staying hidden, which meant he could be approached. She called So-Yeon that evening. Warm voice. Reconciliation tone. She was sorry about Saturday. She had been worried, that was all. She missed her sister. Could they have lunch? So-Yeon said yes. So-Yeon always said yes. That had always been the thing about her. What So-Yeon did not know, what she could not have seen from the outside, was that in the penthouse in Hanam-dong, Tae-Yang had appeared at the apartment that same evening and was sitting across from Min-Joon at the desk by the window, speaking quietly. So-Yeon was in the library. The door was open by 3 inches. She was not trying to listen. She listened anyway. Most of it was too low to catch. Corporate language, names she didn't recognize. The word acquisition twice. And then, clearly, because Min-Joon had shifted and his voice carried differently, the original terms. Tae-Yang's response, quieter. She still hasn't reviewed them. A pause. Min-Joon, she will. So-Yeon turned a page she was not reading. After Tae-young left, she sat with the phrase and turned it over. Original terms. The agreement she had signed in the lawyer's office. She had read it, but quickly, in the way that people read documents they have already decided to sign. Standard language. Standard clauses. She had assumed. She went to her room, found her copy in the bottom of her suitcase, where she had not touched it since moving in. She started reading from the beginning. She was on page 7 when her phone buzzed. Unknown number. A message. Ask your husband who you were to him before the wedding. She read it twice. She set the phone face down on the bed. She picked it up again. She looked at the message for a long time, at the specific shape of it, the way it was worded. Not who he is, who you were. Past tense. Directed at her. She thought about the photograph in the drawer. She thought about the barley tea. She thought about not tonight, and it's not time. And she will. She put the contract back in the suitcase, went to the kitchen, stood at the window with a glass of water, and looked at Seoul and tried to organize what she knew into something that made a coherent shape. She could not. Min-Joon appeared in the doorway. He looked at her, at the glass of water, at the window, at whatever was happening in her face that she had not managed to put away in time. He did not ask. She turned to look at him. "Who am I to you?" she said, directly, the way she had learned to say difficult things, without preamble, without softening, because softening had never actually made anything easier. He looked at her for a long moment. The third kind of silence. "Sit down," he said. "I'd rather stand." He leaned against the doorframe, looked at the window, looked back at her. "Not tonight," he said. And then, before she could respond, "Tomorrow. I'll answer tomorrow. All of it." She studied his face. She had been studying it for weeks, learning the vocabulary of a face that did not speak often. She found nothing that looked like avoidance. She found something that looked, instead, like someone who was building up to something they had been building up to for a long time. She put down the glass. She went to bed. She did not sleep well. In the kitchen, Min-Joon remained at the window for a long time after her door closed. Then he picked up his phone. Called Tae-yang. "Move everything up," he said. "We're out of time." He was already awake when she came out of her room. This surprised her. It was early, the kind of early that belongs to the city's maintenance workers and people who cannot sleep. And she had assumed she would be alone in the kitchen. But he was there, at the table, with coffee she had not heard him make. And when she appeared in the doorway, he looked up immediately, as if he had been listening for her. "Sit down," he said. She sat. He set a second cup in front of her. Coffee, not tea, the right thing, in the morning, when what was coming required clarity. She wrapped both hands around it. He looked at the table for a moment. Then he looked at her. "What do you want to know first?" he said. She had prepared for resistance. She had not prepared for this. For him to open the door himself, fully, and wait for her to walk through it. "The message," she said. "Who sent it?" "Likely your sister." She absorbed this. How would she know to send it? "Because she found out who I am." It took her 11 days. Something moved across his face. Not quite admiration, but acknowledgement. "She's thorough. She knows about Seo Group." "Yes." So-Yeon set down her cup. "How long have you known she was looking?" "Since the third day." She stared at him. "I have people who monitor that kind of search," he said without apology. "It's standard." "You knew she was investigating you for 8 days and you didn't tell me?" "No." "Why?" He looked at the window, looked back. "Because I was going to tell you everything today, and I needed it to come from me." The morning light was coming through the east-facing windows. Her window, she had started thinking of it as her window, and it fell across the table between them in a way that made the conversation feel both very close and very serious. "Tell me," she said. He told her. He told her about Seo Group, the structure, the scale, the deliberate invisibility he had built around himself over 8 years because the alternative was a particular kind of public life he had watched consume people he cared about. He told her about the holding company, the subsidiaries, The reason the lawyer's office had been in a building with no sign on the door. He told her about the arrangement, that it had not been random, that her name had come to him through a chain of connections that he then traced himself, verified himself, sat with for 3 months before he approached anyone with the proposal. That the lawyer's explanation of the terms had been accurate, but incomplete. That the original agreement contained provisions she had not been shown. "Show me," she said. He slid a folder across the table. Her copy, she realized, retrieved from her suitcase while she slept, or perhaps a duplicate. She opened it. The clauses were on pages 9 through 14. She read them. She read them again. The apartment, in her name, regardless of outcome. A fund, accessible immediately, no conditions. Medical coverage for her mother, extended, permanent. A clause that said, in legal language that took her a moment to parse, that under no circumstances could she be left in a worse financial position than she had been in before the marriage, regardless of how or when it ended. She set the folder down. "Why?" she said. He looked at her directly. "Because I knew what it cost you to say yes." The kitchen was very quiet. "That's not a complete answer," she said. "No," he agreed. "It's not." She waited. He looked at the window, at the coffee, at his own hands on the table, a gesture she had not seen before, something self-conscious in it. The gesture of a man who was not accustomed to being the one who had to find words. "I'll answer the rest tonight," he said. "There's something you need to know first, about the photograph." She went still. "The woman in the drawer?" "Yes." She held his gaze. He held hers. "Tonight," she said. "Tonight," he said. She pushed back her chair. She had lunch with So-Yeon at noon. She had agreed before she knew what the morning would bring. And she kept it because she had always been the type who kept agreements, even when she wanted not to. They sat across from each other in a restaurant that So-Yeon had chosen. Nice, neutral, the kind of place that said, "I am being reasonable." It did not take long. So-Yeon was warm for 11 minutes. Then she began, carefully, gently, with the particular skill of someone who had practiced this, to suggest that So-Yeon might want to reconsider. That things were more complicated than they appeared. That she, So-Yeon, had information that might change how So-Yeon saw things. And that perhaps, given all of this, the most practical thing would be to end the marriage before it became, her word, entrenched. "He's not who you think," So-Yeon said. "You don't know what you're in." "I know more than you think," So-Yeon said. So-Yeon reached across the table, touched her hand. "Uni, I'm trying to help you." So-Yeon looked at her sister's hand on hers. She thought of all the times she had believed that sentence. She took her hand back. "I'm going home," she said. "So-Yeon." She put money on the table, stood, put on her coat. "Don't contact Min-Joon directly," she said. Quietly, evenly. "Don't show up at the building. Don't send anonymous messages to my phone." She picked up her bag. "I know it was you." She left. She did not look back. Outside, the city was cold and indifferent and entirely itself. She walked to the subway with her hands in her pockets and thought about original terms and photographs and a man who had made barley tea in the dark without being asked. She went home. He was waiting. He was in the library when she arrived. Standing, not sitting, in front of the shelf she had identified weeks ago as different from the rest. The worn books, the ones that had been read more than once. He turned when he heard her. She set her bag down in the hallway, came to stand in the library doorway. "Tell me about the photograph," she said. He reached to the shelf, not the books. Below them, a small box she had not noticed, the kind that blends into shelving the way things blend in when they are meant to stay. He opened it, took out a photograph larger than the one in her drawer, the same image, uncropped. He handed it to her. She looked at it. The building in the background she now recognized as an older version of a Seo Group office, the original headquarters, before the renovation. The woman she didn't know was young, laughing at something outside the frame, wearing the kind of clothes people wore to work in the early 2000s. And at the edge of the photograph, half out of frame, a boy, 7 or 8 years old, looking not at the camera, but at the woman. "My grandfather's office," Min-Joon said. 2002. The woman worked there for 8 months before she left to care for her husband after his accident. So-Yeon looked at the woman's face. She looked for a long time. "That's my mother," she said. "Yes." The word landed in the room and stayed there. She looked at the boy at the edge of the frame, at what she could see of his face, the direction of his attention, fixed completely on the woman in the center of the photograph. "You knew her," she said. "I was 8. She worked for my grandfather that year. He paused, the longest pause she had ever heard from him. "She was kind to me, specifically, in a way that people are not always kind to children who are difficult to reach." He looked at the photograph. "She left before I understood what that meant. I didn't know her name until 14 months ago. When you started looking. So-Yeon sat down on the edge of the reading chair. She held the photograph carefully at the edges. "The marriage," she said. "You chose me because of her. I chose you because of who you are." He said it without deflection. "The connection to your mother was how I found you. What I found when I looked, that was separate." "What did you find?" Someone who had been taking care of other people for so long, she had stopped noticing she was doing it. He looked at the shelves. Someone who said yes to something impossibly difficult and didn't let anyone see how much it cost. The library was very quiet. She looked at her mother's face in the photograph, 20 years younger, laughing, a version of her mother from before the accident, before the long years of illness, before everything that had come after. A version So-Yeon barely remembered. She put the photograph face down on her knee. "The agreement," she said. "The protective clauses. Those were always there. From the beginning. Yes. Even if this never became anything. Yes." She looked at her hands. "Why?" "Because you deserve to be protected," he said. "Regardless of what I wanted." The sentence sat in the room. She did not respond immediately. She was not the type to respond immediately to things that required real response. She held things, turned them, found their weight. He seemed to understand this. He did not fill the silence. He let it exist. When she finally looked up, she looked at him directly. "What do you want?" she said. "You. Not the arrangement. Not the terms. You." He held her gaze. He opened his mouth. His phone rang. "Tae-Yang." His face said so before he could stop it. He looked at her. Something in his expression said, "I'm sorry." Not in words, but she read it. He stepped out to take the call. She sat in the library with her mother's photograph and the particular feeling of a sentence left unfinished, hanging in a room that had suddenly grown very large. Tae-Yang's call lasted 4 minutes. Min-Joon came back to the library doorway with his jacket already in hand. "I have to go," he said. "Tonight. I'll be back by morning." She looked at him. What happened? Something that should have been handled before now. His voice was even. But she had learned his voice. There was something underneath it, not quite urgency, but the controlled version of it, the version that came from years of keeping everything at the same temperature regardless of circumstances. "Soo-Jin," she said. He looked at her. What did she do? A pause. "She went to the board," he said, "with documents. She's claiming the marriage was fraudulent, that you manipulated your way into it through family connections to Seo Group." He said it without inflection, which made it worse somehow. "She brought fabricated correspondence." So-Yeon stood up. "I'll come with you." "I'll come with you," she said again. Same tone. No room for negotiation. He looked at her for a moment. "Get your coat," he said. The Seo Group headquarters at night was a different building than it was in daylight, quieter, more itself. The way places are when the performance of daytime has stopped. The board convened in a room on the 31st floor that So-Yeon had never seen, that existed for exactly these situations, things that needed to be resolved before morning. 7 board members, 2 of Soo-Jin's lawyers, Soo-Jin herself, in a chair that she had positioned carefully, a person who knew how rooms worked. She saw So-Yeon come in behind Min-Joon, and something moved across her face. Surprise, quickly controlled. She had not expected this. Good, So-Yeon thought. For the first time in a long time, she thought. Good. Min-Joon presented the documentation in 11 minutes. He did not raise his voice. He did not perform. He laid out the factual record of the marriage arrangement, the timeline, the legal instruments, the chain of communication, with the specific clarity of someone who had anticipated exactly this and had prepared accordingly. He presented Tae-Yang's testimony. He presented the original correspondence, authenticated, against the fabricated versions Soo-Jin had provided. One of Soo-Jin's lawyers began putting papers into his briefcase before Min-Joon was finished. When he was done, the room was very still. One of the board members looked at Soo-Jin. "Do you have a response?" Soo-Jin looked at So-Yeon. For a long moment, the two sisters looked at each other across a room that contained a significant portion of So-Yeon's husband's life's work and the ruins of something Soo-Jin had built from 12 days of calculation. So-Yeon looked back at her. She did not look away. She did not soften. She looked at her sister with the expression of someone who had finally, completely, stopped waiting to be seen. Soo-Jin looked away first. "No," she said quietly. No response. The board dismissed her. Legal proceedings were mentioned, calmly, in the tone of inevitability. Soo-Jin walked out. She did not look at So-Yeon as she passed. So-Yeon watched her go. She waited for something, grief, anger, relief. She found something quieter than any of those. The specific exhaustion of a person who has been carrying something heavy for a very long time and has finally set it down. The boardroom cleared. Tae-Yang appeared at So-Yeon's elbow. He held out an envelope. Plain, white, her name on the front in handwriting she did not recognize. "He left this with me 3 weeks ago," Tae-Yang said. "He said to give it to you when the time was right." A pause. "He didn't tell me when that would be. I'm using my judgment." She took it. She looked at Tae-Yang. Something had shifted in him. The perpetual professional composure had loosened slightly, the way it loosens when a long effort is nearing completion. "You knew my mother," she said. He looked at her. "Yes. She worked for the Seo family." "She was the kindest person on that floor," he said. Simply. "I was 22. She treated me like I was worth talking to." He paused. Min-Joon was not the only one who remembered her. She looked down at the envelope. She opened it. Inside, 1 page, handwritten, his handwriting. She recognized it from notes she'd found around the apartment, functional and precise and entirely itself. She read it. It was not long. He was not a person who used more words than he needed. But the words he had used were the exact ones, selected with the care of someone who had written and discarded other versions before arriving at these. And she felt the weight of that selection in every line. She read it twice. She folded it carefully, put it in her coat pocket. She looked up. Min-Joon was standing across the room, speaking quietly to the last remaining board member. He was not looking at her. And then he was. The way he always was, suddenly. Completely. As if he had known the precise moment she would look up and had simply been waiting for it. The board member said something. Min-Joon responded without looking away from her. She walked toward him. The board member excused himself. They stood in the emptied room. The 31st floor, the night city behind the windows, the residue of everything that had just happened still present in the air. She put her hand in her coat pocket, felt the folded letter. "You wrote this 3 weeks ago," she said. "Yes." "We had barely spoken 3 weeks ago." "I know. You already knew." He looked at her. "I had been building up to knowing for a long time." She held his gaze. Outside, Seoul was enormous and continuing and entirely indifferent to the two people standing in a 31st floor boardroom with the specific gravity of people who have arrived by very different paths at the same place at the same time. "Finish what you were going to say," she said. "In the library, before the call." He was quiet for a moment. Then he told her. He told her in the way he did everything, without ornament, without building toward it, without the performance of feeling that made feeling easier to witness, but less true. He told her that he had spent 8 years building a life that was entirely his own, and entirely private and entirely sufficient, and that he had not understood what it was missing until a specific Tuesday morning in a civil registry office, when a woman with one suitcase and a folder with dividers had stood beside him under fluorescent lights and said yes, with a half-second of hesitation that he would think about for a long time afterward. He told her that the hesitation was the thing, not doubt. He had understood immediately it was not doubt. It was the weight of all the years of saying yes to things that cost her. The specific sound of someone choosing, again, to bear something alone. He told her that he had not known how to say any of this before now. That he had written it instead and given it to Tae Yang because writing it had at least made it real in a way he could verify, touch, confirm had actually happened. That he was not good at this. That she probably already knew that. She said, "I know." He said, "I would like to be better at it. I would like to try. With you." She looked at him for a long time. This was the man who took buses, who made barley tea in the dark without being asked, who had written provisions into a legal contract to protect a woman he had not yet met because he believed she deserved protection regardless of what happened, who had sat across from her at 2 a.m. in a kitchen and not left, who had written a letter 3 weeks into knowing her because he had already understood, somehow, what he was building toward. She thought of her mother in the photograph, young, laughing, standing in a building that had shaped the person in front of her before either of them had been old enough to understand what was being shaped. "My mother would have liked you," she said. Something happened in his face. Small. Significant. "I think I would have liked her," he said. She took the letter from her coat pocket, held it for a moment, put it back. "I'm not going anywhere," she said. He looked at her. "I don't want to renegotiate terms," she continued. "I don't want a different arrangement. I want the one we have. I want to stay." She held his gaze. "But I want you to stop deciding alone when I'm ready for things. I want you to let me in." He was quiet. He started. "That's what I want," she said. "Specifically. You asked me to be specific." Something moved through his expression, the almost amusement she had first seen weeks ago, but different now. Warmer, less defended. "Yes," he said. "Yes, to which part?" "All of it." She exhaled. Not dramatic. Not a release of anything Hollywood. Just a breath. The way a breath happens when a body has been holding something it can finally put down. She looked at her husband. At this person who had turned out to be so much more than anyone had seen, including her, including himself. And she felt something she had not felt in a long time. Not rescued. Not resolved. Chosen. Clearly. By someone who chose things carefully and rarely and with complete conviction. "Okay," she said. He reached out and took her hand. Didn't squeeze it. Didn't make it a gesture. Just held it. The way you hold something you intend to keep. Outside, Seoul continued. 8 months later, the Sao Group annual reception was held at a venue in Gangnam that required invitations and had a guest list that people in certain circles spent months trying to appear on. So-Yeon arrived with her husband. She wore something green. She had not planned this consciously. She had simply reached for it. And it was right. And she had remembered only afterward what Bok-ja had said at the Grand Hyatt about her dress being the wrong color, which felt now like something that had happened to a different version of her life. Min-Joon walked beside her with his hand at the small of her back. Not a gesture for the room, not a performance of a marriage. Just where his hand was. The room noticed. The room always notices when someone who has been invisible chooses to be seen. They moved through the reception together. He spoke when it was necessary, and no more. She had learned to find this restful rather than worrying. She had also learned that he listened to everything, which meant that when he did speak, people listened back. Bok-ja arrived 40 minutes late. She arrived in a car that she had hired specifically for the occasion, and a dress that suggested she had been preparing for this event since the wedding. She swept into the room with the particular energy of someone who had decided that arriving late to an important event was a statement rather than a failing. She found So-Yeon near the windows. "Daughter-in-law?" she said. Loudly enough for the surrounding area to hear. She had started using this term 3 months ago and showed no signs of stopping. "Bok-ja imo," So-Yeon said. Bok-ja looked at the room, at the people, That's Seo Min-Joon across the space. In conversation, composed. I always knew, Bokja said. Confidently, completely without irony. From the first day, I told everyone, this is a good match. This one will last. So-Yeon looked at her. Bokja looked back. Auntie? So-Yeon said gently. You brought a camera to photograph the disaster. Bokja waved this away. I was documenting. It's different. So-Yeon did not argue. Later, after the reception, they drove home in the kind of quiet that is not silence, but rest. The city moved past the windows, the bridge, the river, the lights of Hanam-dong appearing in the distance. She looked at him driving. He felt her looking. He always did. What? He said. She shook her head, looked back at the window. A moment, then, quietly, without preamble, the way he did everything. I'm glad it was you. She turned to look at him. He was watching the road. He had said it the way he said things he had already decided, without hesitation, without performance, like it was the most natural sentence in the language. Nench.